Hey Mixers, welcome back to another NFL video. Today we're going to go through every single matchup of week one, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the spread, the total, and the money line. So we'll go through all of those. I'm going to recap some bets that I've already made that I shared in a previous video, and I have some new bets for you as well. So it's going to be a longer video because we're going through every single matchup. But if you find value in this is something that I am willing to do every week. It takes a lot of effort from me to research all of this every single week. But if that's something that you guys find useful, and if I find it useful in my betting, then I'll go ahead and do it. So let's jump into that. All right, guys. So like I said, this is going to be a longer video since we're going to go through every single matchup on the week one slate, and I'll let you know what I think about the spread, total, and side. So let's just jump into it and get started. So first off, we have the Cowboys at the Eagles. The spread is 7. It is available at 6.5 in some places. The total is 46.5. The money line opened at plus 260 for the Cowboys, minus 325 for the Eagles. Now, the best you can get is plus 265 for the Cowboys and minus 315 for the Eagles. So those lines have not moved too much. Let's take a look at their head-to-head. Obviously, they're in the same division. So last year, the Cowboys were absolutely miserable. They had no Dak in both of their Eagles games and no Jalen Hurts in the Week 17 game against the Cowboys. But the Eagles did take both of those wins home with giant spreads, minus 28 and minus 34, and the game totals were 40 and 48. I don't know if we can really rely on those stats for this year because Dak wasn't playing. This team is very different with Dak on the field. So, I mean, if he's healthy, obviously. I know there's not a lot of big Dak fans out there. I am a big Dak fan just for fantasy purposes. I don't know about real life football. I could take him or leave him, really. But let's take a look at these other 3 seasons when, people were a little bit healthier. So in the 2023 season, at the Eagles won minus 5, and the total was 51. At the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys won minus 20, and the total was 46. So they split there, each of them winning their home games. And then the 2022 season, again, they each won their home games. The spreads were -9 at Philly, -9 at Philly, 6 at Dallas, and totals of 43 and 74. No Dak in the Eagles game, and no Hurts in the Cowboys game in that season. So kind of interesting there. And then in the 2021 season, the Cowboys swept the Eagles. The spreads were not even close, 20 and 25, and very high totals, 62 and 77. No Jalen Hurts in that January game, which was played in Philly. So here are my takeaways from all of that data. Dak has not beat Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia straight up since they've both been in the league. The spreads in Philly are 28, 5, 9, and 25. But with both QBs playing, the spread, there's only one game in Philadelphia where both of those quarterbacks played. The spread was only 5. So I think that's why we're seeing this spread of 7, which I think a lot of people went in heavily on the Eagles, but I don't know that for sure. But I'm just assuming a lot of people auto bet Eagles minus 7. The totals in Philadelphia, the game totals, have been 40, 51, 43, and 77. With both quarterbacks playing, it was 51. So that game total of 46.5 doesn't look super crazy considering that historical data. So I am not betting any of the totals, spreads, or leans in this game, but here are my leans. And I am going to track these throughout the season every single week so that you can see kind of how good my takes are. I'm not in a state where I can bet these, so I have to go out of town to bet anything like this. And so it really has to stand out to me for me to want to drive across the border, several hours to try to make a bet like this. So I am leaning Eagles money line minus 325. I am leaning Cowboys plus 7 to cover the spread. And I am leaning over 46.5 game total. All right, the next game we have here is the Chiefs at the Chargers, except this game will actually be played in Brazil. So keep that in mind. The spread is 2.5. The Chiefs are favored 2.5. The total opened at 44.5. Now it's 45.5. So it has gone up. The money line opened at plus 125 for the Chargers, minus 150 for the Chiefs. Now the best line you can get is plus 125 for the Chargers still, and minus 126 for the Chiefs. So the line has moved slightly in the Chiefs' direction on the money line, but the spread has stayed roughly the same. So let's look at the historical data here. Last year and for the last 3 years, the Chiefs have swept the Chargers every single year. But the spreads have been small. So some of these games have been super tight. Last year, the spreads were 7-2. The spreads the year before were 14-1. Before that, 3-3. And before that, 6-6. And the Chiefs did win one game that year. Justin Herbert also did win a game against Patrick Mahomes in the 2020 season, but I don't have that data here just because I only had room for 4 seasons. So that's what I put on here. The game totals had kind of been all over the place, but sort of skewing to the higher end earlier, and then more recently skewing towards the lower end. So here are my takeaways for this data. Herbert has beat Mahomes twice, once at home and once away, but not recently. Herbert has not beat Mahomes since 2021. This game is in Brazil. So these are all just things to keep in mind. Obviously, the Chiefs might be without Rashee Rice for the first game of the season, and the Chargers should be fully healthy. The spreads with both QBs playing in the game, because I'm going to take out the games where both QBs weren't playing, which was just one game. The spreads have been 7-2, 14-3, 3-6, and 6. So I think it's going to, the low spread is definitely justified. And then the totals with both QBs playing have been 27, 36, 48, 25, 51, 57, 54, 62. The total here is 45.5. So the question is, are these two teams going to play like they did 3 years ago? Or are they going to play like they have in the past 2 seasons? And you really kind of just have to take a stand on that, I guess. I do think Justin Herbert is going to be better. I do think he could win one against the Chiefs. And if he does win one against the Chiefs, then it's going to be an ugly game probably. An ugly low-scoring game, I think. Because in any high-scoring game, I think the Chiefs will eventually, end up taking that win. So here are my leans. I am betting one bet in this game, which I already made. So Chiefs moneyline minus 126 is where I would lean on the side. Chiefs minus 2.5 is where I would lean. And then my best bet that I did make was under 45.5. So I do think that the game is going to stay under and be kind of a tighter game. Although the game in Brazil last year was a little bit of a higher scoring game. I don't know if that has anything. It was obviously two different teams, the Eagles and the Packers. So I don't know that we can really take anything from that, where we've only had one game in Brazil. But I guess we'll find out as we play more and more games there every year. All right, the Steelers at the Jets. The spread is 3. The total opened at 39.5. It is now down to 38.5. The money line opened at plus 130 for the Jets, minus 155 for the Steelers. And the best you can get now is plus 138 for the Jets, minus 160 for the Steelers. These two teams have not played each other very often. So they did play each other last year. And of course, they had different quarterbacks. In fact, these exact quarterback situations, these two teams have never played each other. And with most of these same players on the field, these two teams have never played each other. So I don't know what we can get from this historical data, but let's take a look at it anyway. Last season at Pittsburgh did take that game by 22, the spread, and the game total was 52. The 2 years before that, the 2 times they met before that in 2022 and 2019, the Jets won both of those games, one in Pittsburgh, one in New York, and those spreads were 4-6 with a 44-26 game total. So my takeaways here are these teams have had a lot of turnover at QB, both of them, over the last several years. The Steelers have lost away games 100% of the time in the last 5 head-to-heads, which I didn't show you all of those. The Jets have won 3 out of 5 of the last 5 head-to-heads. 2 of those were at home. So the Steelers have not won in New York head-to-head against this team in the last 5 meetings. So since like 2017. That doesn't mean they can't win this year, but it's just something to take into consideration. So my leans here are going to be the Jets plus 138 on the money line, the Jets plus 3 on the spread, and the over at 38.5. I know I'm expecting a low scoring game. I really am, but I think it's too low. So I'm going to go ahead and take the over on 38.5. I'm not betting this. This is just my lean. I am betting the Jets in a teaser, a 7.5 point teaser. So I'm taking the Jets plus 10.5 in a teaser, which I'll show you later. All right, so the Dolphins at the Colts. The spread is Miami minus 1.5. The total opened at 45.5 and is now up to 46.5. The money line opened at minus 105 for Miami, minus 115 for Indianapolis. And then the best line you can get now, it's about the same, minus 102 for Miami, but I did see plus money on Indianapolis, plus 100, if you think they can win the game, which I do, actually. Spoiler alert. I think they could win the game. I'm not saying they will win the game. I just think they could. So these two teams do not play each other a lot. I just have two historical matchups for you to show you. So in last year, 2024, the Colts won at home. 6 was the spread, 26 was the total, very low scoring game. Tua did not play in that game. And then in the 2021 season, the Colts had Carson Wentz. The Miami Dolphins had Jacoby Brissett, which is kind of funny because Brissett started on the Colts. But the Colts won that game in Miami, and the spread was 10, total 44. So the takeaways here are the Colts have won 4 out of the last 5 head-to-heads, going back all the way to 2015. They don't play each other a lot. They've never had this combination of quarterbacks. We still don't know who the quarterback of the Colts is going to be. But my leans here are going to be all on the Colts side. I'm going to lean Colts money line plus 100, Colts plus 1.5, and under of 46.5. I know the line has moved up. I do understand. I know what Tua can do when he's healthy. I know what Tyreek Hill can do when he's healthy. I know what Achane can do when he's healthy. But I'm not too high on the Dolphins this year. They're going to have to prove it to me. And I know that if there's any team to prove it against, the Colts would be the right call. And that's why I haven't made any of these bets official. I'm not putting any money on any of this. These are just my leans towards the Colts. The next game here is going to be the Carolina Panthers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The spread opened at 3.5 for the Jacksonville as a favorite, and now it's 2.5. So it has moved a little bit in favor of the Carolina Panthers. The total opened at 46.5. It's still there. Money line opened at 125 for Carolina, plus 125, minus 150 for Jacksonville. And now the best that you can get there is plus 130 for the Carolina Panthers, minus 145 for Jacksonville. In the 2023 season, these teams don't play each other a lot, but in the 2023 season, Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing in that game, and Jacksonville won at home. Minus 26 was the spread, and 26 was the total. It was a shutout, so the Carolina Panthers did not score. Anyway, Bryce Young was playing in that game. I do remember that. And then in the 2019 season, Gardner Minshew was playing for the Jaguars, Kyle Allen for the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers did take that one at home. Spread was 7, and the total was 61. So my takeaways here is the home team won in the last 2 matchups between these two teams, and the current iterations have never faced each other. Jacksonville's defense is much improved from last year, and they are the home team. Carolina has an improved offense, in my opinion, from last year. They were playing better at the end of the season. I'm not betting any of these right now, but my leans are Jacksonville on the money line, minus 143, Jacksonville on the spread, minus 2.5, and the over of 46.5. I actually think this is going to be a really exciting game to watch. At least I hope that's the case and not like the shutout game from 2 years ago. All right, let's talk about the New York Giants at the Washington Commanders. The spread opened at Washington minus 7. Now it is Washington minus 6.5. The total opened at 45.5. The money line opened at plus 270 for the Giants, minus 350 for Washington. And now it is plus 245 for the Giants, minus 292 for Washington. So the odds have gotten a little bit better for Washington fans if you're wanting to bet on them, and not as good on Giants fans. You should have got that early if you wanted that. Let's look at the last 4 seasons head-to-head. These are obviously teams from the same division. So last year, Washington Commanders obviously played so good, way better than people were expecting, and they swept the Giants. The spreads were only 3 and 5, though, so they were close spreads. The totals were 39 and 49, so the Giants were able to score in those games against a Washington Commanders defense that wasn't very good, and they didn't really upgrade it much this year. So before that, the New York Giants had swept them in 2 back-to-back seasons, all 4 games, and the spreads were 7, 12, a tie, and 8. The totals were 21, 50, 40, and 32. And then in the 2021 season, which now we're getting way back before any of these players that are on the field were playing for either one of these teams, the Commanders did sweep the Giants there. So I think what we're seeing here is that these two teams don't trade a lot. One of them just sweeps the other one. So my takeaways here is that the home field doesn't matter in this series. It more matters just the players that are on the field and how the team is doing in general for the season. Low spreads for the most part, so either team could potentially win this game. Average totals with higher highs instead of lower lows. So they don't have a lot of defensive, like low scoring games between these two recently. So here are my leans. I'm not betting any of these. Washington moneyline minus 292. New York Giants plus 6.5, because I do think this is going to be a close game. And I think the value here is on the Giants plus 6.5. I think Washington is going to win this game. It's just a matter of can they win? Like if they just win like last year, it's only going to be by 3 or by 5. So winning by a whole touchdown, I realize they went to the playoffs last year, but it just hasn't been happening against the Giants. Maybe they just don't play as hard because they know they can win the game. I'm not really sure. But I think that value there is at plus 6.5. I don't like drinking juice, so I don't like to bet on these lines that are, it has to be negative money. So I'd rather parlay win totals and spreads into teasers or things like that to get some plus money, especially since I have to drive out of town and place these bets. So it's just not worth my time. Okay, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals playing at the Cleveland Browns. The spread has opened and stayed at the exact same spot, Cincinnati minus 5.5. And I think the bookmakers were spot on with that. After we look at the historical data, you'll see why. The total is 45.5. The money line opened plus 200 for Cleveland, minus 250 for the Bengals. Now the best line you can get is plus 210 for Cleveland, minus 235 for the Bengals. And in the head-to-head last 4 seasons, last season, they were swept by the Bengals. The spreads were 7-18, 35-30 were the totals. In the 2023 season, they traded. They both won their home games, and the spreads were 21-17, so not even close. Those games were both blowouts both ways. And then 27-45. In the 2022 season, they both won their home games again, so minus 19, minus 13. Totals were 45-33. And then in the 2021 season, Cleveland took both of those games against the Bengals. The spreads were 25-5, and the totals were 57-37. So Cleveland has been able to win at home. That is the main takeaway. Cleveland has been able to win at home every year except for the most recent year. We're talking big spreads. It's either a blowout it's a blowout for one team or the other. These aren't close games. And then higher totals typically. So Cleveland has never covered 5.5 when they lose the game. That's another takeaway here. So if you think they're going to lose this game at home against the Bengals week 1, then they're not covering this 5.5 spread. It's going to be a blowout. The games between these two teams has not gone over this specific total, 45.5, since 2021. So that is also something to take into consideration. I know there's a narrative out there that the Bengals start slow, but I don't think that that's going to be the case this year. I think that injuries have a lot to do with that. I think off the field stuff has a lot to do with that. So last year, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both had some contract issues, and obviously there were some injury issues going on as well. And then the year before that was the year that Joe Burrow was having some injury issues before the season started. So I think they start off strong here. I think they get it done. The Browns are a horrible team. We don't even know who's starting at quarterback for them. So I'm not betting any of these in this matchup. I think the Bengals aren't going to get off to that slow start as much this year, but the Browns have just always played them tough. So, all right, so my leans for this game, I'm not betting any of these. Cincinnati minus 235 on the money line, Cincinnati minus 5.5 on the spread, and under 45.5 on the total. All right, jumping into the Las Vegas Raiders at the New England Patriots. The spread is New England favored minus 2.5. The total was 43.5 at the open. It's now 42.5. And then the money line opened at plus 120 for the Raiders and minus 140 for the Patriots. Now it is plus 140 for the Raiders and minus 154 for the Patriots. So the line has moved even farther towards the Patriots, which I think is correct. I agree with that line movement. These teams do not play each other a lot, but 2 years ago when they played, and then the year before that, The Raiders did win both of those games, and they were both at home games for the Raiders. The spreads were 7-6, and the totals were 38-54. And then in the 2020 season, which was the year that Tom Brady went down to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England won that game at home. The spread was 16, and the total was 56. So my takeaways from this data is that all the home teams have won 100% of the time in the last three matchups going back to 2020. So for the last 5 years. Both of these teams were both bad during that time, so it just came down to the home team won. The leans are, I'm going to lean towards the home team. So New England minus 154 on the money line, New England minus 2.5 on the spread, and then over 42.5 on the total. I do think this is going to be a boat race. I actually think this is going to be a great game for fantasy props, or for fantasy, but also for player props. So we will definitely be taking some from this game. All right, so Arizona at New Orleans. The spread here is Arizona minus 4.5 is where it opened. Now it's Arizona minus 5.5. So that line has moved towards Arizona as the favorite. Total was 41.5, and it has not moved. The money line open was plus 165 for New Orleans, minus 200 for the Cardinals. And the best you can get now is plus 200 for New Orleans and minus 235 for the Cardinals. They've only played each other a couple times in the last few years, and obviously, we're going back to where there were different players on the field at this time. But in 2022, they played at Arizona, and Arizona won that game. Spread was 8, total was 76. So it was a hard-fought game there. And then in the 2019 season, they played in New Orleans, and New Orleans won that game. The spread was 22, and the total was only 40. So the takeaways here is that the home teams have won in 4 out of the last 5 head-to-head matchups. I didn't show you the other 3. But going back to 2013, the home teams have won 4 out of 5 times. The Saints also won in Arizona in that 5th game. So the totals in the 5 head-to-heads ranged from 38 to 89. So kind of 38 is the floor, maybe 40 is kind of the floor, and then 89 is what it got up to. So my lean is over on the total, 41.5. And then my best bets, there's too much value on New Orleans here. So I know they're not going to be a good team this year. I also don't think Arizona is going to be a great team this year. I think they'll be better. But I'm going to take New Orleans plus 200 on the money line, and I already bet this. Also, I'm taking New Orleans plus 13 in a teaser because the money line obviously is just kind of like a flyer, like a half unit. And then I'll also put them in a teaser for some plus money as well. So Tampa Bay at the Atlanta Falcons. The spread here is Tampa Bay favored by 1.5. Total is 48.5. Moneyline opened at plus 105 Atlanta and minus 125 for the Buccaneers. The best you can get now is plus 110 for Atlanta, minus 112 for the Buccaneers. I think the wrong team is favored here, so I'm just going to point that out. Going back to the last 3 seasons, last season Atlanta swept the Buccaneers. Obviously, that was with Kirk Cousins at the helm. The spreads were 6-5, and the totals were 66-57. Obviously, one of those games went into overtime. And then in the 2023 season, they traded both teams losing their home game. And then in 2022, they traded both teams winning their home game. So it's kind of confusing on the stats here. But here are my takeaways from this series. There's small spreads. It's going to be close. And high totals. There's no clear home or away advantage here. But the Bucs here might be down there starting all-pro tackle, Tristan Wirfs. He might not be playing, and if he doesn't play, Baker Mayfield hits the ground a lot more often, or at least gets pressured. So my leans here, I'm not officially placing these yet, but I'm going to take Atlanta plus 110 on the money line, and then I'm going to take Atlanta plus 1.5 on the spread. It is 2 in some places, so if you can find plus 2, and then over 48.5 on the total. I'm not betting any of those, though. Those are my leans. My best bet for this matchup is going to be Atlanta plus 9 in a teaser. All right, Denver hosting the Tennessee Titans. The spread is Denver minus 7, and it has stayed pretty much there. I think you can get it at 6.5 somewhere. Total is 41.5. Moneyline opened at plus 280 for the Titans, minus 350 for the Broncos. Now you can get plus 310 for the Titans, and you can get minus 375 for the Broncos. So those lines have moved in the Broncos' favor. Well, not moved in their favor, like if you want to bet on them, but like they're becoming a heavier favorite. These teams don't play each other often. The last time they did was 2022. They played at Tennessee, and Tennessee won. Spread was 7, total 27. Obviously, just different players on the field, so it's just so hard to compare these. And then the 2020 season, Tennessee won that as well, but it was in Denver. The spread was 2, total was 30. So I don't think there's a lot of takeaways from that historical data, other than that the spread has been small in these matchups and low totals. Cam Ward has never played at elevation. In college, he was playing in Florida, and he played most of his games on the East Coast or in the Midwest. So he's going to struggle at elevation, I think. Also, the Broncos might have the sneaky best secondary in the league. I mean, not that sneaky, but they're not at number 1. PFF hasn't ranked them number 1, but they're ranked 1 or 2 in my book. I think the Ravens are up there as well. But they used their first pick on a cornerback when they already had an elite corner, the best one in the league. So I don't think anything through the air is happening at Denver this year, especially not from a rookie quarterback on a bad team. So my leans here, I'm leaning towards Denver minus 375 on the money line, but I'm not betting this. Denver minus 7 on the spread, and then over 41.5. Under 41.5. I must have just typed that in wrong. Yeah, under 41.5 on the game total, which these two teams have not cleared that in recent years. So I don't really understand why it's that high, but I guess maybe if the Broncos do all the scoring. I did make a best bet in this. I put Denver in a teaser, so I teased that in my favor to get minus 1.5 on Denver. All right, San Francisco 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks. The spread is minus 1.5 in favor of the 49ers. The total is 45.5. The money line opened at plus 105 for Seattle, minus 125 for the 49ers. Now you can get plus 108 for Seattle and minus 125 for the 49ers, so it has not moved at all, hardly. Let's look at the historical data because these lines aren't making sense to me. I don't know how Seattle even stays in this game. So last year, they won a game against the 49ers, did Seattle, in California. The 49ers won in Seattle. The spreads were 12-3. The totals were 60 and 37. The 2 seasons before that, 2023 season and the 2022 season, they were swept by the 49ers, all 4 games. Spreads weren't even close, 18, 12, 20, and 8. The totals were 44, 44, 34, 34. So that kind of consistency, maybe we just see how this game goes and then we know what the other game's going to look like between these two, because the totals seem to be very, very consistent in those 2 seasons. And then in 2021, obviously this was back before the 49ers had a lot of the people that they have now, but the Seattle swept the 49ers in those games. The spread was 7. Totals were 49 and 53. So my takeaways here are Seattle has not won at home since 2021. The spreads and totals are very consistent within the same year. So however they do in this first game, it could be a good indication of how they're going to do when they meet up again. There's usually a bit of a higher spread when they play in Seattle. So these are my leans. 49ers minus 125 on the money line. I don't know how you could bet it any other way. I can't believe we're getting 125. I almost want to drink that juice. 49ers minus 1.5 on the spread. It's just wild. It's a wild spread to me. And then over 45.5 on the total, just because, they've had a bit of higher totals in Seattle. Last year was 60. So I'll bet on the over again because I think that they'll try to keep it interesting, even though I don't think they can win the game. All right, the next one here is Detroit at Green Bay. The spread is Detroit minus 1.5. That's how it opened. Oh, but guess what? That has flipped now. Detroit plus 1.5. So the total is 49.5. The money line opened with both of them at minus money, minus 115 for Detroit, minus 105 for Green Bay. Now you can get Detroit at plus money, plus 110, and the Packers are still minus 116. So things have moved towards the Packers in this one. Let's just look at the data here. So last year, Detroit swept the Packers. The spreads were 10-3. Totals were 38 and 65. Jordan Love did play in those games. The year before that, they traded both winning the away games. The year before that, in 2022, Detroit swept them. Tight spreads and low totals. And then the year before that, I think that was Jordan Love's first year. Or no, Jordan Love's first year was 2022, I feel like. That was Jared Goff's first year in Detroit, 2021. In 2021, they both won the home games and huge spreads, huge totals. So the stats are kind of telling us a couple different things. So higher totals in general. Detroit has won in Green Bay 3 years in a row. The Lions obviously lost some players and coaches in the offseason. I think this tight spread is justified. There's only over one time on the total in Green Bay in the past 3 years. So I'm going to lean under that total, 49.5. I'm going to take the plus money, the plus spread with Detroit, plus 1.5. And then I did bet the Detroit money line because I was getting plus money for it. So why not? I mean, you never see Detroit at plus money. I realize that they lost some coaches, they lost some players, but that doesn't mean that the players that are still there who are elite just suddenly became bad. So they're still going to be at least competitive. And if you're going to give me plus money for Detroit to win this game, I'm going to take it. I also put Detroit in a teaser. So Detroit plus 7.5 in a teaser. All right. The next one here is going to be the LA Rams. Houston at the LA Rams. The spread is Rams favorited minus 2.5. The total is 46.5, and that has dropped to 45.5. The money line opened at plus 125 for Houston and minus 150 for the Rams. Now you can get it at plus 133 for Houston, minus 145 for the Rams. So it hasn't really changed a lot. These teams don't play a lot, but in the 2021 season, they played in Houston, and the Rams won that game in Houston by 16 spread, and the total was 60. And then in 2017, the Rams won at home, and the spread was 26, and the total was 40. So the Rams have handily beat the Texans in the last two matchups, but obviously we have new players on the teams now. In 2021, Matthew Stafford was playing for the Rams, but obviously CJ Stroud had not been drafted yet. So here are my takeaways. These teams haven't faced each other with the current iteration of players. This is a good offense in the Rams going up against a good defense in the Houston Texans. And the Rams defense might be pretty good too, but we just have to wait and see. There should be points in this game. So I'm going to go over the total, 45.5. I'm going to take the Rams on the money line, minus 145, and the Rams on the spread, minus 2.5. All right, the Baltimore Ravens coming to face the Buffalo Bills in the regular season, which makes a difference. The spread is Buffalo minus 1.5 as the favorite. Total is 51.5. The money line opened at plus 105 for Baltimore, minus 125 for Buffalo. And the best you can get now is plus 100 for Baltimore and minus 116 for Buffalo. In the last season, they did face each other. Baltimore won that game in Baltimore by 25. The spread was 25, and the total was 60. Josh Allen did not play in the entire fourth quarter, I believe, and part of the third quarter too, because the Ravens were just killing them. So they sat Josh Allen in that game. But the Bills came back to win in Buffalo in the playoffs. The spread was only 2, and that total was 52. The year before that, 2 years before that, in the 2022 season, Buffalo won in Baltimore. The spread was 3, and the total was 43. 2 years before that, 3 years before that, in 2019, Baltimore won in Buffalo, 7-point spread, 41 total. And then in the AFC divisional, in the playoffs, Buffalo won at home. Spread was 14, total was 20. Brutal. And then in 2018, Buffalo won in Baltimore. The spread was 44, and the total was 50. So all this is telling me that it's going to be a high total. Obviously, we already knew that. It's the highest total on the slate. Home field advantage only matters in the playoffs, it seems, because Baltimore has been able to win in Buffalo in the regular season, and Buffalo has been able to win in Baltimore in the regular season. So I'm not making any of these bets here. My leans, give me all the plus money. These are two great teams. I think the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl this year. I already bet that. So I'm going to just take Baltimore with the plus money, plus 100 on the money line, Baltimore plus 1.5 on the spread. And I'm going to take under 51.5 just because it's such a high number. I know that they've gotten over this number before, but they only got over the number by 1 point in the playoffs. And then the 60 total, that was a huge blowout. That's not going to happen again. So if this is a competitive game, I think it's going to be a high total, but not quite 51.5. So we'll see. And then our last game on the slate is Minnesota at Chicago. The spread here started with Minnesota favored at -1.5. Now Minnesota is the underdog plus 1.5. The total is 44.5. Moneyline opened with Minnesota as the favorite -115, and Chicago was also minus money at -105. Now the best you can get is -106 on Minnesota and -108 on Chicago. The last 4 seasons, let's take a look. Minnesota has won every single matchup for the last 4 seasons, except for one home game, like in Minnesota, where the Bears won with a spread of 2 and a total of 22. So it was a very close, low-scoring game in winter. Well, around Thanksgiving time. So it was cold, but I guess it was in Minnesota. Anyway, so my takeaways here, Minnesota has dominated this series. No home wins for the Bears in 4 seasons. And so why are we thinking they're going to win here? I know that they got Ben Johnson from the Lions. I know people are really high on their draft picks. I'm not. So give me the plus points and the plus money. Minnesota plus 1.5 on the spread. I'm not betting these. These are just leans. Under 44.5 on the total. My best bets here are going to be Minnesota plus 100 on the money line. That's what I got it at. But the best you can get it at now is -106. I still, I wouldn't bet it, but I'm leaning Minnesota's way. And then Minnesota plus 7.5 in a teaser. So I will show you that. So my best bets here, I've consolidated them all for you onto one page. My best bets are going to be the Lions plus 110 on the money line at the Packers, 1 unit. You can still get that number. Vikings plus 100 on the money line at the Bears, 1 unit. I didn't see that number, but check and see if you can get some plus money on the Vikings. Chiefs at Chargers under 45.5. This game is in Brazil. We're doing a full unit on that. Saints money line plus 200 versus the Cardinals at home. We're going to do half a unit there. And then 2 teasers for you. I already gave this one out, the 6-point teaser, plus 160. Lions at Packers plus 7.5. Vikings at Bears plus 7.5. Even if the home teams win this game, I don't think it's going to be by a touchdown. And then the Broncos hosting the Titans minus 1.5. So we'll do a half unit on that teaser and a half unit on this new teaser, 7.5 teaser plus 105. The Saints versus the Cardinals. These are all home teams, by the way. So home underdogs. The Saints at home hosting the Cardinals plus 13.5. So that'd be a 2 touchdowns for the Cardinals to win that one. The Jets hosting the Steelers plus 10.5. The Falcons hosting the Buccaneers plus 9.5. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love talking football. I love arguing about football, and I cannot wait for football to start. I know this was a longer video. If you found value in this, this is something I am willing to do for every week of the regular season. It might be a little bit more in depth as well because we'll have to discuss player injuries and things like that. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and can't wait for football to get started, guys. Thanks.